Dennis Zoglman. You know, I've pointed out before in another video that the old man was like a modern version of Huck Finn's dad, who he called Pap. Pap Finn. If you've ever read the book, you know how twisted and in his thinking Huck's dad was towards his son, the priorities, just complete dishonesty, selfishness. The old man was a full-time alcoholic who had no sense ever at all that he needed to go to any kind of rehab therapy or do anything or do anything on his own or anything for the benefit of himself or the benefit of his kid or anything. On top of that, on top of the drunken bullshit and the sober bullshit, he had this hateful bent toward me, like this jealous bent. His mom, Bernie, you know, I think, I would guess growing up in that house with her and his dad, but her especially, these two people, two German Americans in middle America from the 20s and 30s, kind of nuts, unloving, abusive. I think maybe that played a role in turning this guy into Darth Vader. And I was the son who his anger was going to be focused on. He wanted to turn me to the dark side and be just like him. That's what he wanted. And to some extent, I guess I did go down that path of behavior as a teenager. But in the years since then, I found that, no, I am not like him at all. I actually can grow and learn and change my mind and change my behavior, while he is stuck. He is the same guy now at age 70 that he was at 17. Same guy, same mindset. Nothing has changed with this guy, except whatever you have to change as you get older. And also, to some extent, he had to sort of fool some of the people around him that he was kind of a good dad and all that. But the people he was fooling are dipshits. You don't have to put on a brilliant act to fool a bunch of dipshits. So it was never a hard job for him to just pacify these other idiots, many of them abusers themselves. But he had this jealous, thoughtless, greedy bent against me as a little kid. Very strange. You know, a normal dad would be like protective and loving and caring and sharing and caring, and not this guy. Oh no. So these people are all the baby boomer generation, and I'm Gen X. I hate to generalize, label generations. You know, it's kind of unfair. There's good and bad people in every generation. But, you know, when you're talking to masses, I guess you can generalize a little bit. Things do change over time a little bit in the country, in the world. And all of the people that I've had to contend with have been the baby boomers and their parents, the so-called lost generation, or the silent generation, the so-called silent generation, people born in the late 20s and 30s. Some of them barely old enough for World War II to 17, 18. A lot of them too young for World War II, but older enough for Korea, that sort of thing. But anyways, their kids were the baby boomers. Their parents were, in my experience, the ones I've known, they were all pretty cold, crazy, unloving. And the baby boomers, pretty cold, crazy, unloving, and full of shit, two-faced. And then you got the kind of the Gen X was sort of all that crap fell on Gen X. And yeah, Gen X had the toys and the movies and the music come out. But so did the baby boomers. They had all that stuff. So, it was amplified for Gen X compared to the baby boomers. But man, these baby boomers and those silent generation people and the World War II generation people, the so-called greatest generation, I don't know. A lot of them are cold, cold people. Let's hear George Carlin explain it in his words, and then we'll go on from there.
A lot of these cultural crimes I've been complaining about can be blamed on the baby boomers. Something else I'm a little tired of hearing about. The baby boomers. Whiny, narcissistic, self-indulgent people with a simple philosophy. Give me it, it's mine! Give me that, it's mine! These people were given everything. Everything was handed to them. And they took it all. Took it all. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And they stayed loaded for 20 years and had a free ride. But now they're staring down the barrel of middle-age burnout, and they don't like it. They don't like it, so they've turned self-righteous. And they want to make things hard on younger people. They tell them abstain from sex, say no to drugs. As for the rock and roll, they sold that for television commercials a long time ago. So they could buy pasta machines and Stairmasters and soybean futures. Soybean futures. You know something? They're cold, bloodless people. It's in their slogans, it's in their rhetoric. No pain, no gain. Just do it. Life is short, play hard. Shit happens, deal with it. Get a life. These people went from do your own thing to just say no. They went from love is all you need to whoever winds up with the most toys wins. And they went from cocaine to Rogaine. And you know something? They're still counting grams, only now it's fat grams. And the worst of it is the rest of us have to watch these commercials on TV for Levi's loose-fitting jeans and fat-ass Docker pants. Because these degenerate, yuppie, boomer cocksuckers couldn't keep their hands off the croissants and the Haagen-Dazs. And their big fat asses have spread all over and they have to wear fat-ass Docker pants. Fuck these boomers, fuck these yuppies, and fuck everybody now that I think of it.
And his mom, Bernie, is the same way. She dumped shit on me like I was spoiled. I heard that my whole life. You're spoiled. You're bad. Well, I wasn't spoiled and I wasn't bad. I was living in a house with crazy people who themselves had come from a house with crazy people. Those people were bad. I was a good kid. Dennis Zoglman prioritized his life to his drinking buddies. That was his main focus, saving up money so he could kind of buy the things he wanted while still funding all of his shitty habits and living the drunk ass redneck lifestyle. That was it.
You know something? They're cold, bloodless people.
As far as what went on here at home, I guess he, for the most part, paid the utility bills and the groceries, which back then doesn't come to a whole lot of money. But there was no generosity from this guy towards me or towards my mom. There was no gifts. There was no like wedding anniversary gifts. There was no nothing. It wasn't, hey, it's your birthday. Hey, it's Christmas. It was, my mom bought stuff, and you got stuff from other relatives, sort of, kind of, but there was no father son. Here you go, my son. Look at. He bought me a BB gun when I was 8 years old. I'm thinking back. I'm surprised he thought to do that. I guess he thought some of these things he had to, because other guys would have noticed. Hey, why didn't your kid have a BB gun? At some point, other people would notice. He bought me later on. He bought. I think he bought me 2 guns, which that's fine. If you're into guns and hunting a little bit, you don't have to buy your teenage kid an entire gun collection. I'm not complaining about this. I'm just saying there's a million other times when there was just no regard at all. Yet he complained that he didn't get anything or something, like, as a 7-year-old, it's my job to get him a gift for this and that. And when I did a couple times as a kid want to get him something, but I had no money because I was a kid, and I said something to my mom, she didn't want to buy him anything because, he's a drunk asshole. They didn't have a good marriage, so she's like, well, I don't want to. So she would reluctantly buy him something that I could give him, It was such a screwed up situation with these 2 clowns. But I'm going to give a few examples here of his lack of generosity or thoughtfulness towards his kid, but his generosity towards his drinking buddies and outright ripping me off and being financially a deadbeat dad. So yeah, I think the old man hanging out with his buddies, catching or killing animals, getting drunk, that was his thing. And if I could tag along, ride in the back of the truck, yeah, great, whatever. But there was no, like, father, son, anything. Everything was just hostile toward me. It was just, at some point in the day, drunk or sober, there's going to be some hostility at me, like resentment.
You know something? They're cold, bloodless people.
So one day, when I was maybe 8 years old, me and Mom are down in Evansville, and we go to a shopping mall. We probably went down there for like a doctor dentist thing or something, I don't know. But then she'd go to a mall. We go in the mall, and there was a rock convention. And I was interested in rocks. I had an interest in rocks. And there were tables, guys selling different stones, gems, whatever. And of course, it's a money-making thing, and they're going to sell bottles of various rocks that they probably got for next to nothing. And, it's $5 for a bottle of rocks or whatever, but you're a kid, and the rocks are shiny and pretty. That's what it is. So she bought me a She either bought or I had $5 from something, I don't know. Anyways, I got a bottle of rocks, and it was like $5. Sort of like the ones you see here, different colors, but something maybe not that bright. But anyways, we come home, we come in the house. He's sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm excited about my bottle of rocks. And I show him, and I'm like, look what I got. And he's like, whoa, what'd you pay for that? I'm like, $5. Instead of engaging me in a talk about the rocks or anything you would do like a sensible dad would do with his kid, he just took a big shit on the fact that we had spent $5 on a bottle of rocks. That's a ripoff, blah, 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 just a chance to dump on us. So he worked in, from the time I was like 5 or 6, he started working in a coal mine. And he would, in a coal mine you find fossils, things like that, petrified wood. So one day, he's at home, and he's telling me and Mom about he found this rock, kind of like something you see here. This is an example I found on the internet. It was something like this probably, and it was a fossil imprint of leaves on a rock. And he's telling about, boy, it was, they were perfect. It was a pretty, leaf pattern. And then he tells us he gave it to one of the guys he worked with. And my mom said, well, Shane is into rocks and fossils. Why didn't you give it to him? And then he's kind of like, I don't know. Again, this is a guy who didn't care that I was into fossils and rocks. And when he found a nice fossil at work, he never thought once, but I'll give this to my kid. He gives it to somebody he works with. He gave it to a 40-year-old guy instead of his 8-year-old kid. That's how this guy's mind works. I remember when I was maybe 12, this is some years later, he found a pretty big piece of petrified wood, kind of like the picture you see here. It was like 18 inches long. It was like a piece of firewood, but it was petrified wood. He found this in the coal mine. And a big piece of wood, like a piece of a tree. And he puts it in the back of his truck, and he says, let's go to this guy's house. And we go up the road, and it's a guy that he drank beer with in the bar. And he knew him outside the bar a little bit. And he knocks on the door. Hey. He's like, yeah, I got a piece of petrified wood for you here for your flower bed. I don't know if he mentioned he wanted some at the bar when they were talking. I don't know what but somehow he knew to take this petrified wood to this guy, who then threw it in his flower bed. Again, while I'm with him, and in that whole process of bringing it home and giving it to this guy, he never thought of giving it to me, or just keeping it here at the house. Totally thoughtless about his kid. Again.
Something? They're cold, bloodless people.
When I was about 13, I got a Thompson Center Hawken muzzleloader. Very nice gun. Very nice looking gun. And I fiddled around with it for a couple of years, and then he got it. And you guys that are into muzzleloaders, you know how it goes. You end up with about a shoebox full of all these little tools and gadgets that go with a muzzle loader. Little measuring things, little things you put on the ramrod, cleaning pieces, and I got some pictures here sort of representing that. But you know what it is. So the old man took the muzzleloader, and I was like, at that point, by the time that happened, I was like 17, 18, and he had it then. He owned it at that point. And he shot one deer with it. And after shooting that deer with it, he decided, I'm done with that muzzleloader. And he wanted to just hang it on the wall. He's never going to shoot it again. Doesn't want to fiddle with it. Just decoration on the wall. So he still had this shoebox full of tools and gadgets that went to the muzzleloader, which had belonged to me earlier. A handful of years before, they were mine. But when he got the gun, he got the gadgets and the tools. So now he decides, well, he doesn't want to load the gun and shoot it anymore. He's just going to hang it on the wall for decoration. So I'm at his house one day, and there's a guy who, he wasn't really a drinking buddy, but they knew each other, and the guy had a muzzleloader. The old man goes and gets this box of muzzleloading tools. And he's like, hey, here you go. You can have these. And he hands this guy this, box of stuff, which is, probably a couple $100 worth of tools and gadgets. Here, you can have these while I'm standing there. It never occurred to him that he could just give them to me, that I might want them or use them at some point. He gave them to a drinking buddy.
You know something? They're cold, bloodless people.
When I was 16, the old man never bought me a three-wheeler. You know how sometimes a dad will be like, I'm going to buy my boy a four-wheeler or something. I bought a used three-wheeler when I was 16. If I remember right, we went in half on it at first. It was about $600. Me and the old man, I think we owned it together. And it was kept at his place. He had land to ride it around. That's where we used it, whatever. At some point, I bought him out. I bought out his half of the three-wheeler, so I owned it totally. But I still left it there for the most part. So he still used it. At some point, I guess I sold it to him for like $500 or something. He had it for a few years, and then he bought a new four-wheeler. And he decided to sell the three-wheeler for about, I think he got $400 or $500 out of it. And he never asked me if I wanted to buy it. He never gave me first chance to buy it. He just sold it to some guy somewhere that he knew. I think it was somebody he worked with. And he just sells it and never didn't bother to ask me if I wanted to buy it or anything. Going back to when I was probably 13, the old man had cattle here in Hayesville. And then he had the cattle over at his land. But anyways, at the time, he had cattle here at Hayesville. The old man has spent his whole life usually trying to figure out how he can get other people to do his work for him so that he doesn't have to. So when I was about 13, he said, I'm going to make you a deal. there was a steer out here. We had a little calf, you know, little bull calf or whatever. Now, first of all, I want to say I don't eat cows. I don't believe in killing cows. Uh, I don't. So, but when I was a kid, you know, I was surrounded by all this animals being killed. It was just part of life. As a grown up now, I don't go for that. But at the time, this is how things were. So we had a bull calf out there, you know, going to be a steer. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you feed and water the cows, you know, every day for the next year, that steer belongs to you. And whatever he brings when we sell whatever, when he gets sold, that'd be your money. And I don't know what that would have been back then in the 80s. It would have been in the mid to late 80s. I don't know. I have no clue what dollar amount that would have been. I have no I have no idea what dollar amount that would have been because he never paid me. If he had paid me, I'd probably remember it. So the steer got sold, and about a year went by after that, and he still hadn't paid me, and I hadn't mentioned it. So we're driving down the road in his truck one day. We're driving down, I think it's County Road 10 in Martin, Davis County. Driving down the road, and I thought, well, I'm going to mention it. I said, hey, you never did pay me for that steer. And he informed me that he wasn't going to. And he never did. Yeah. Now, I went through the part of the divorce saga. I still got to do another part 3 or 4 to cover the rest of it. But I put up some of the divorce papers. I'll put some of it up here. So he agreed to pay, and this was after, 15 years of his bad behavior. He agreed to, and my mom divorced him, he agreed to pay a whopping $50 a week child support. Plus medical insurance, and if I went to college or trade school or whatever, something like that. And he quickly ducked out of all that. He signed the papers and he agreed, and then did what is called a deadbeat dad. He did not pay child support, didn't pay any of this stuff, threw a fit, wiggled out of it, tried to con me to get out of it, and then finally just barged in the house one day and said, I'm not paying that. And his excuse was, I don't have to pay it legally because I was working full time when I was, 15 or 16. that was he used me working full time as his get out of paying child support excuse, which I don't think is true. I don't think it's legal. And my mom did not push it. She should have, but she didn't, because she is pathetic as well. So that's a little sample of the mindset of Dennis Zoglman as a dad. Always giving his drinking buddies priority over his kid. And he's had his drinking buddies have done work for him, and he's paid them. In fact, one of them boasted to me how well he was paid for some work he did for the old man. He said, "Boy, he really pays good." He was, being serious, but he doesn't pay me on the agreement with the steer, you see. So it's just a whole lifelong deal of that kind of shit with this guy. After Dennis ducked out of paying any child support, in the years after that, basically throughout the rest of my teenage years and so on, supposedly he couldn't pay it or wouldn't pay it. Well, he did have the money to pay it, but he bought horses. He bought a tractor. He built a garage. He built a lake that I think cost at least $10,000. He bought a lawnmower that cost almost $10,000 just to mow the lake. He didn't need it to mow his yard or anything else, just to mow the lake, which he did not need it. He could have brush hogged the lake dam and all that. So he bought a John Deere tractor, lawnmower, just to mow his lake. What else? He bought all kind of goodies, but he could not make good on his child support that he signed his name to, the divorce agreement. I've been pretty much, I hate to say disabled, but that's kind of the truth, with the chronic fatigue, migraine problem for several years now. So making money is tough. In those years, any years, ever, he's never called me or wrote me or sent me any money saying, "Hey, do you got food? Do you got heat for the house? It's 10 below zero. Do you got heat? Can you pay your electric bill for heat or whatever?" Never. None. Nobody from his side of the family ever, all those good Christian people, none of them ever said to me, checked on me, "Hey, you doing all right? You got food? You got heat?" Okay. It's just the idea of it. These people are so full of shit and so thoughtless and cold.
The baby boomers. Whiny, narcissistic, self-indulgent people with a simple philosophy. Give me it, it's mine! Give me that, it's mine! You know something? They're cold, bloodless people.
They don't think of themselves that way. They're so out of it, they don't realize it. I realize it. Some years later, I explained in writing to the old man's younger brother, Scott Zoglman, why I had parted ways from the old man at some point after years of shitty treatment from the guy. And Scott, the good Christian, his reply to me was, "You just want revenge." This guy's A fucking dumb asshole.
You know something? They're cold, bloodless people.
A few years back, I wrote to the old man and I said, hey, remember that child support you didn't pay? You ought to pay that up. And he wrote me back a note. I'm surprised he could write. But anyways, he wrote me back a note that said something like, that money was not meant so that you could sit around on your lazy ass. I'm sitting on my lazy ass with my migraines and chronic fatigue and everything else.
You know something? They're cold, bloodless people.
So I'm going to leave you with some pictures of Willie, our house cat, that Dennis threw through the kitchen window when I was 5 years old, when he had a fit of anger because the kitty cat scratched him. And I got a video up about that. I need to make a new one. But anyways, there's some pictures of Willie the cat that was another animal victim of Dennis Zoglman.